it largely mirrors environmental education. So one of the great strengths of environmental education is that it's place-based, right? In that the best environmental and outdoor learning is relevant to the places where the kids live and where they go to school. And most of the funding matches that. Funders from given communities, will create funding opportunities for children in their community or in their neighborhood to go on these programs. And so if you look across the country, you see donors in the greater Seattle area donating to programs that are in the greater Seattle area, donors in Florida donating to programs that are in Florida. You rarely see a donor in San Diego contributing to something that's happening in Connecticut or in Colorado. And so a lot of that is place-based, and that's a strength because you can build relationships with people in your community. It's also a weakness for any sort of like pure system-wide advancement. And so one of the key funding strategies that has to come on is through the school system itself, through the public school systems, at the federal level, at the state level, and at the district level. When school systems start to prioritize environmental and outdoor learning, they fund it. And when they fund it, kids can go on these programs. And not just some kids, not just the kids who might be more inclined to do that anyways, but every kid. That's the great thing about a public education, is every child has the opportunity to have that education. So if you're going to fund every fourth grader in California to go on an environmental learning field trip, that literally means every fourth grader, not just the fourth graders on the right side of town or not. And so there has to be a public-private partnership between private philanthropy and federal and state funding streams going into the school system that supports it. Without that, we'll never get to scale, because there are so many programs that it's inherently it costs a significant amount of money to take, say a classroom of 30 kids, load that classroom onto a school bus, drive that school bus to a field learning experience, spend an entire day or week, and if you're spending the week, then you have facilities that are needed and meals that are needed and all that stuff, and then cart the kids back to the school. That's a pretty expensive proposition. And so private philanthropy can only get so far until the school systems themselves really value the role that this type of learning plays in children's formative developmental years. We won't get to scale. So it's got to be a public-private partnership. Well, a lot of that is word of mouth, meaning there are some groups that we know exist. For example, the North American Association of Environmental Education has a state affiliate network. And so we know that in every single state in the United States, there is a group whose job it is to network. And so there's 50 organizations right there for us to evaluate. What we've also realized is that you only know who you know, and that you're going to continue to, kind of stay in the same lane if you continue to talking to those folks. So one of the strategies that we do, in addition to the groups that we know of, is we put out requests for proposals every couple of years. And we state that we're looking for just what you just described. We could be looking for a collaborative backbone network in Ohio to build the capacity of the nonprofit organization's ability to deliver culturally relevant programming. And then anybody who believes that they can do that work can send us in a proposal and articulate why they do that. So in some cases, I use that to illustrate a point, that in some cases, we do research and we go find organizations and we ask and we start talking to them about a potential partnership. And in other cases, we throw open, the doors and let those organizations come in. It's not enough just to go find, people who somebody else recommended to you. you end up essentially repeating those patterns. That's not a bad thing. We have a great number of grantees. But in terms of, it's not our only strategy. We want to make sure that we can get approached by organizations who we don't have a relationship with, we don't necessarily share life experiences with. And so we want to be open to their perspective on how this work can play out, and not just have it be what we've traditionally done, only what we've traditionally done in the past. One of the assumptions going in is that the formal sector is more networked and connected in their system than the nonprofit sector. And so if we're going to make an investment in something that happens in the formal sector, it's usually presented to us as a very clear logic chain, that this investment will lead to this, will lead to this, will lead to this, because here's how they see the system, and this ripples into this and that. On the nonprofit side, the relationships don't often exist. And so we may invest in for the first year of an engagement, for example, solely in building relationships among nonprofit partners. And then the second year could be, okay, now that we all know each other and we play well in the sandbox, what could we do together? And so the second year could just explore what type of collaborative thing that could happen that would help all of the programs, not just some of the programs. And then maybe the third year is actually doing that thing. And so so it's often that when we're funding on the nonprofit side, that we have to back up and meet the organizations where they are, and then fund moving forward, as opposed to assuming they're at a certain place. We can assume in a formal structure that a district has built relationships with the schools in that district, right? Has some sort of relationship between the district and the schools. We cannot assume that on the nonprofit side. They may come to us and say, hey, look, we've got this network together. We've all, spent a couple of years getting to know each other. We've realized that we all could use professional development on science learning, and that's what we want to do to strengthen our programs. Great. So then we can meet them where they are. But often we just have to ask a slightly different set of questions to figure out what the capacity of the organizations are and how networked they are to begin with, before we can think about doing any sort of scaled kind of collaborative work.